To you live from the unceded lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation, from right here in the mighty Karam Karam Swamp. My guest and conversation partner this evening is Dianna Snape. She's an Australian photographer who is renowned for her compelling vision of architecture, interiors and landscapes. With more than 25 years of experience photographing projects from leading architecture and design studios, her work sits at the intersection of design intelligence and visual storytelling. A graduate of RMIT University's prestigious Bachelor of Arts Photography Honours program, Dianna brings a deep conceptual understanding to every commission. Driven by a lifelong fascination with both the built and natural environments, she travels extensively in pursuit of meaningful, well-considered design, capturing spaces not just as they appear, but as they are lived, felt, and remembered. Her images are regularly published in leading national and international design publications, valued for their clarity, atmosphere, and sensitivity to architectural intent. In 2022, Dianna released her first book, Architecture at the Heart of the Home, published by Thames and Hudson in collaboration with writer Jan Henderson. The book features 22 thoughtfully designed homes across all 6 Australian states, showcasing work by some of the country's most respected and established practices alongside emerging architectural voices. The publication reflects Dianna's ability to distill complex design narratives into cohesive, emotionally resonant visual stories. Beyond her photographic practice, Dianna is a passionate advocate for the professional and creative advancement of the industry. She is a founding committee member of Image Makers Association Australia, serving as president from May 2022 to August 2024. During this time, she led the association's formative growth, expanding membership from 50 to over 170 people, establishing governance frameworks and forging key industry partnerships. She continues to volunteer her time in support of the association's long-term stability and evolution. Dianna is deeply committed to education and mentorship. She serves on RMIT University's Industry Advisory Committee for Vocational Education Photography programs and has been invited to judge Australia's top emerging photographers for Capture magazine in 2023, 24 and 25, as well as the 2024 Head-On Photo Awards. Dianna was named as one of the 100 most inspiring architectural photographers by the International Loop Design Awards in 2022. Dianna, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a lot.
It's so good to have you on. It is a long bio, but one can't cut down their accomplishments, right?
Oh, wow.
It's important, I think, to celebrate yourself. And just this week, I was saying to people, you've got to celebrate certainly the little wins, but the big wins are just as important too.
Yes, that's true.
I know you're a listener of the show, and I know you're anticipating the first question, so I'll pull you out of your misery. I know you know that I'm about to ask, what is your earliest memory of a building or place?
Yes, thank you. And I love that question in the interviews I've listened to. I thought, what a great way to start. And I had to think about it because I think our first childhood memory is sometimes informed by the things our parents reflect on with us. But when I dug deep, I thought it really is. I was brought up until I was 5 in country New South Wales, where all my family are, in a place called Gunnedah, which is about an hour from Tamworth. And we lived with my great-grandfather in an old house on a floodplain, and he had one of those outdoor verandas, and he had all these old little tiles that were on, you know how tiles have those little square tiles that have the string back, so they kind of, some come off and some are placed, but he had these stacks of them and some were loose. And when we were there, we spent hours on that balcony just playing with those tiles and running up and down the veranda. And he had one of those old stoves with a pitchfork, you know, where you cooked your toast on the end of a fork. And he had big angel posters in our bedrooms that were the Gabriel's angels overlooking you. And they're the things, you know, that's the place that I remember and feeling safe and loved there.
Grandparents are so special, but especially great grandparents. So rare.
Yes, we were lucky. My parents were very young when they had us.
Your description as well also just conjures imagery for me of the most Australian possible property.
Yes, yes. And I've just went back there at Easter with my son, and it is home. You know, you go back and your family's there and you're on farms, and the all the birds are out and the sunsets are beautiful. Yeah, it really is a place that I return to, and when I do return, I feel connected.
How often does it flood?
Floods a bit. My dad, it just depends which area you are, but my grandfather's house was near a kind of flood area, and my father has a farm on near the river, so his floods, sometimes they can't leave. When it's flooded in, they can't get out.
And it's just normal, it's part of life.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of flood or famine there. It's either, at the moment, they're in drought, so it's a very hard life when your livelihood's dependent on the weather. You know, I know at the moment everyone's worried about feeding the cattle.
How many generations have lived on that property or around that property?
My dad's farm's relatively new. He went away, like we moved away when I was 5, and then he went back about 15 years ago. But yeah, my great-grandparents are the earliest ones I know that were there. Yeah, I think someone stole a sheep or something and ended up on a ship, and yeah.
Ended up in Australia.
Ended up in Australia.
What an amazing connection to landscape and to place.
Yes.
And to nature. Of course, very obvious links for me to your love of also landscape photography and travel photography that you capture not just architecture.
Yes, but I guess I still feel in the commission, obviously interiors are a bit different, but even all the buildings I do, I still feel all of that stuff isn't individual, you know, and you know, we obviously, all the firms you work for understand and work together for that, but I still love that when you unpack a building, or I'm doing a lot of VSBA schools at the moment over the last couple of years, and
that's state government schools for our listeners.
Yes, and a lot of them are in out of suburbs.
Yes.
And suburbs that are new, you know,
yes.
and beautifully the Indigenous history is being embedded in the story of the school in so many ways, and a lot of them are right by wetlands, or you know, I nearly had a drone attacked by a swarm of birds, and it's you feel that sense of place very strongly in the school itself. So yeah, I feel that resonates in a lot of not just the travel, but just my commercial practice as well.
No doubt capturing the landscape well is just as important as designing it well, because I find in architecture, if you don't have a good landscape, the building looks like it just landed.
Yes, that's true. And it's hard in some of these estates where, I mean, you're lucky if you have a wetlands that's established nearby, but some of them, you know, everything's been dropped and it's got to be built up.
Growing up amongst flood, amongst drought, working the land, where did the creative influence or the creative interest come from?
My father was a photographer in the Air Force. So my father left Gunnedah to join the Air Force and married young, and then had a young family. So we were, I think when I was about 7, he got posted to Penang in Malaysia. So we spent from year 2 to year 6 in Malaysia, which are probably most of primary school. And we lived in a street that had Chinese-owned kind of large Westernish style houses, but at the back of the house were the kampongs, which was where the poor Malaysian people lived. So we grew up as kids. Of course, where did the kids want to go? They want to go over the kampong where they've got fires and machetes, and so you'd ride your bike over the bridge. And even though we didn't speak the language, we didn't share a common language as kids, you know, we just integrated and played. And I feel really fortunate that I had that experience at a young age, because I got to see extreme poverty. But I got to see extreme joy. I got to see communities that, you know, we got to see how they loved, how they looked after their children with nothing, and the smells, all the Asian smells, you know, for me, they're fond smells. Every time I go anywhere in Asia, it feels like Malaysia, you know. And so, I always say to my parents, that was, for my sister and I, the greatest gift they could have ever given us was that childhood. I think it also gave us compassion and understanding, and also a very clear position of our privilege. So I think that sense of place gave me my desire to, my connection with community and other cultures, and something that I've always pursued. You know, I've travelled far and wide. I did my final photo essay for RMIT in the Hides gas fields in the Southern Highlands of Papua New Guinea. I've recently been over doing, you know, we stayed with a Maasai tribe with our son on our last trip to Tanzania, and I work with a community over there. So that's just, I believe that comes from that wonderful, joyous childhood experience and respect of culture. And yeah.
And busting out of your comfort zone, your parents were brave to do that.
Well, they had no choice. It was posted there.
Well, they still led the way.
But they did lead the way, and they also demonstrated to us a respect of that culture. So we were never those white Australians trying to lock ourselves away. My father has always loved, he loves Australia and he loves Indigenous Australia. And when we returned from Malaysia, he wanted to get out of the Air Force and he loved the horse racing. So him and 3 mates all set up a business doing all the photo finish and race photography around country Queensland. So I used to go with him every Saturday. My mum would say, go and keep your father company, which would involve driving anywhere from 2 to 6 hours to a racetrack. And he would sit me in the grandstand and give me a best bets. And $4 or something I was allowed to have, I think at $2 I was allowed to have a punt on a race, $1 each way. He'd give me a hot dog for lunch, and then 5 hours later we'd drive home. And I actually, as I got older, I didn't want to go. It was boring. And that's when he gave me my first camera. And I think he wanted me to take photos of the horses, but I'd walk around taking photos of, bits of wood at the back of the grandstand, but that was my entree into, boredom was my entree into photography.
It is. They say it's such a gateway to creativity, even necessary ingredient in creativity.
Yeah, but I think my father's love of it and just having it around you, I don't know, I think there's something innate in you about creativity as well. I don't think I've always had this idea that you can foster it, but you can't teach it. Yeah. I think some people just have a natural love of it and desire and ability, and I think composition in photography is one of those things. There's people that have to try hard at every shot, every shoot, and there's people that have an innate, and I feel like that's a benefit of mine, that I've had this intuitive just gift, I guess, a little bit with that. That's what brought me to it. Yeah.
Do you still have those first photos of the timber?
Do I still have them? Gosh, I don't know if I've still got those negatives. They're probably at my mum's in a shed somewhere. No, I didn't. I've got all my travel, my very first trip overseas. Like my earliest photography I probably have from like 1992, apart from, snapshots at school. But the stuff that I was doing, Dad probably has the stuff from the racetrack because he used to process it all.
It's sometimes remarkable to go back to those first works and think that was so pure before I knew what it was, before I knew what photography as a discipline was.
When I do that, like when I look at the travel stuff and the stuff that I first did when I came to Melbourne before I studied photography, I actually still think that's some of the best stuff because it's all so unstructured and it's just what you see and what you take. That's why it's always lovely when new young kids enter the industry. They have a purity to their vision that hasn't been tainted yet by technique and, just all that stuff that you kind of learn it all and then you have to undo it all so you can be pure again after you finish a degree. That's what I found. You kind of get...
The constant work of an artist, really.
Yeah.
Of course, RMIT is such a strong school for design and arts. Was it always the goal? Did you know... long time out?
This is funny. When I left school, I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to go to NIDA. My mother said, don't be ridiculous. You're not doing that. So to punish her, I said, I'm not going to university. And I had a friend whose uncle worked at AMP. I got ducks at my school, so I got a very high TE score. And she said, my uncle works at AMP and they're looking for kids with over 950 to put on this accelerated development program. You should try out. And all I wanted to do was move out of home. So I thought, sure. So I went in and they said, yep, come on in and put me on this program and put me into uni. And after a year, they said, we want you to go to Sydney. And so anyway, I just ended up without any real plan on this, working as a business analyst for AMP. And then I went overseas after about 5 years when I went to travel. Or was it 5? Maybe 3. That was really what made me kind of say I really want to take some control over the direction of my life. And I did a lot of shooting when I was overseas, and I just decided while I was overseas I took a year off and travelled, and about halfway through, I thought I'm gonna study photography. So I got my sister. There was no internet back then and no mobile phones. So I asked my sister to go through all the photography schools that weren't private because I couldn't afford them, and send me the brochures to Poste Restante in London. So when I arrived in London, where I worked for a couple of months, I had all this wad of material, and then I decided RMIT was the one that looked the best. So I'd already made up the decision that when I came back, I was going to apply. So I came back to Brisbane where my mum lived because I was broke after a year of travel, and I had missed, I think I got back in the March or something, so I wasn't able to obviously study that year, but I applied that year, and I flew to Melbourne for the open day, and my friend's parents, I hired a rent-a-bomb from Richmond that broke down every 20 k's. You had to pull over and put water in the radiator. And then I came back I met a lecturer at that open day. His name was Gunter Behensky, an old German, master of photography. And I said to him, am I wasting my time? And he just looked at me and he said, my dear, if every time you had a dream and someone told you it wasn't possible and you gave up, where would your dream be? And he gave me the courage to show up and try for the interview. So back then it was like 500 applicants and 30 spots. And I didn't really have anything other than the travel photography. And when I got back, I'd done a course in Brisbane and I had taken photos of every person that would let me shoot them. And my dad had printed it all for me because I'd done the developing course but not the printing, and I'd mounted them all up on mount board and, went in with a folio. And the interview was terrible. When I left the interview, I thought there's no way I've gotten into this because it was I guess it was highbrow and it was very abrupt, and at the end of the interview, and it was very silent, so I didn't feel very comfortable. And at the end of the interview, they said, do you have any questions? And I said, well, if I'm unsuccessful this year, could you let me know what you think I could do to be a better candidate for the following year? And then John Story, who was one of the interviews, said, well, you could learn to print. And he didn't even look up. And I thought, my God, isn't that what I'm coming here for? Anyway, I went away. I went straight down to the RMIT bookshop and I bought Let's Go Alaska. And I thought, I'm going to Alaska because I just
You wanted to run.
I felt so poorly that there was no way I could have got in. And then I remember I was actually driving to Gunnedah, and when the results come out in the December, and my mum said, just pull over and call me from a phone booth. Again, no mobile phones. And so halfway to Gunnedah, I pulled over from a phone booth because she got the letter. She told me I got in. And I was I'd convinced myself I wasn't in, and I'd gone so far down the rabbit hole about Alaska and going to Seattle and getting this boat. And then it was like, I had to completely flip the whole narrative that, no, I'd be moving to Melbourne in a month and starting a course. So that was kind of how I ended up in the course. And I guess my message for anyone starting out from that was there was nothing about me that made that look like a real possibility. And when I asked afterwards, once I got in, and, the lecturer said to me, we were looking for winners. We're looking for people that are actually going to complete this course and go out into the industry. And they just said you presented not necessarily the best photography portfolio, but you presented so much, just drive that you were focused
serious
on this and serious. And I went back and did high school chemistry that year because I knew that chemistry and sensitometric and, optics of lenses was part of the course back then. And so I went back and did high school chemistry because I didn't do it at high school. So I think that was probably quite impressive to them. But yeah, so that's that story.
Do you remember the moment when the confidence came in?
Not till 10 years into my career did I actually feel, I reckon it was around the 10-year mark into being a photographer that I actually felt that I really deserved to call myself a photographer. That's how long it took. It felt a bit, because I'd had the other, another career working as a business analyst, and I had worked in that capacity all through my degree. I was very lucky. The company I worked for when it was called Daimaru, had an office on the, 42nd floor or something like that. So I used to go from lectures to work, just backwards and forwards.
Now known as Melbourne Central.
Yeah, Melbourne Central. So I was really fortunate that I had that, and I'd had a career where they trusted me to do that. And so I felt when I left that was, I still felt aligned with that identity. It took a long time to feel that I was as valid in my photography career.
Right. No doubt made you a much more mature professional and a better business operator and a better
Definitely.
business owner.
Yeah, it definitely helped. But when I left uni, in my final year of uni, you had to get a mentor.
Yes.
And that's where I...
You met John Gollings.
Yes, and that was a funny story because I had gone to Bali for the whole of... I shared a house with an Indonesian international student amongst a number of other people, and he was Indonesian. He'd go home, and then I'd say, "Oh, I want to go." So I'd go to Bali, well, not Bali, but Java and Jogja, every holiday with him, and he would see his family. Summer we'd travel around, and I worked out I could live off $5 a day in Indonesia, whereas it cost me more to be in Melbourne. So I'd work for maybe 2 weeks straight with the company I worked for, and then I'd go to Indonesia for whatever was left of the holidays. And when I came back after that Christmas, I hadn't got a mentor, and I was feeling very much like it's my third and final year and I need a mentor, and I hadn't done anything. And I was in the darkroom printing, and a guy called Ralph Alfonso, who's a photographer in Sydney now, I think, maybe he's still in Melbourne. Anyway, he was raving about this mentor, John Gollings. And he said, "Oh, he's great, he's so loose, he's just..." And no one back then that I knew, everyone was shooting fashion or portraiture or still life, and I just wanted to be outside. But there was nothing that looked like a pathway to a career that was going to be outdoors.
Right.
And so he was describing him. I thought, this sounds like what I want. And so I looked him up and I called up and, and I got, he because John is such a generous educator, mentor.
Yes.
So he saw me. I mean, it took 3 times to actually get him to show up to the interview, but he was always travelling somewhere. But that was the start of that. And then when I finished my degree, he offered me an assisting job. And, that was the start of my photography career.
What's the number one lesson that John gave you that is still with you to this day?
Oh, he's given me a few pearlers. I think the first one is say yes to everything and figure it out later, because that was not the type of person I was. Do whatever you want until you get caught. His rule is there are no rules until someone tells you they're there. So, we were a funny combination working, because I was raised in a Catholic school, so I was very much a rule follower. Probably it's taken my whole life to undo that. But John was a great... working with John was a great observation in how to not follow rules for me and just to see that there was a way to live that didn't involve this very linear way of,
Yes.
He's a bit of a wobbly line when it comes to how he navigates things. And so I think that was really good for me at that age. I was 26, I think, or maybe I was 20. No, actually it was 28, I think, or 29 when I started working for John. So still young enough to be influenced about... Yeah.
Do you feel that it unlocks something for you creatively, though, to be able to, for want of a better word, loosen up a bit?
Yeah, John gave me courage, definitely. John showed me belief, I guess. I think when someone shows you your value, and it's what I try and teach my son all the time, is don't hang around with people that don't see your worth. And I think that's a great thing to live by. And it's not that John taught me that, but John showed me worth. I think he he was impressed with my business skills and my maturity, I think, and that I could be helpful, reliable, and, I was completely and utterly respectful of the opportunity. I turned down, when I finished uni, they wanted me to go back and work full-time, at my old job. They thought my photography degree was just this little thing I was dabbling in and I'd get over it and then I'd come back to a real job.
Come back to corporate.
Yeah, and, the opportunity John gave me, I honestly don't know that I'd ever be where I am today if I didn't take that opportunity. And it wasn't that I needed him necessarily to teach me about photography, even though he did greatly. What he showed me was how to be a professional operator. He showed me... I observed how he communicated with architects. I observed how he approached a job I observed how he problem solved. And that's why I say to kids today, now they're coming out of uni, I'm a photographer, and then they're retrofitting, trying to work it all out. And I'd never take back those assisting years. They were integral to, and you don't have to take everything on board from somebody else, but you learn so much that you can't learn from a tutorial or it's that life real experience. And I got to travel extensively with John. Within 3 weeks we were in Micronesia shooting for Air Nauru, all these kind of off-grid. I just thought, oh my God, what a gig. And then I went to America with him to shoot all of George Hargrave's landscape architecture projects after the Sydney Olympics. So, it was a really, he's an impressive, his career has been remarkable.
And a past conversation partner in this program said, listeners, I do recommend going back and listening to my conversation with John Gollingson.
Oh, absolutely.
And an amazing career and story. I'm really drawn to this moment how one person, one mentor, one chance introduction unlocked and transformed your whole career.
Definitely.
And you became not just co-workers, but then colleagues and equals.
And friends.
And friends and collaborators, and you still shoot and travel together.
Yeah. It is. I shared the building with John until 2 years ago, for 20 odd years, and I was very fortunate to have that opportunity.
Is it wrong to say that doesn't happen anymore? Where do people meet such?
I think it's different for the next generation, and I'm observing it, and I think it's great too. They're more collective. We weren't as collective, I don't think. So you had to, back when I graduated, there was only about 5 of us that got these full-time positions with really successful, but it was all very, it felt a bit coveted. Not that John was that type of person, but they were rare opportunities, and then other people just didn't get involved. Whereas now there's much more collective studios where you can go and pay for us, but it's more community, I think, than it was when we were there. So I actually think for budding people starting out, I think it's a more connected landscape than what we entered into.
Do you see yourself more in the community of photographers or in the community of architects?
Definitely photographers.
That's where you and John differ. He said architects are his people.
Well, that was his background, and I don't know. It's funny if I'd say I've got a lot of good friends out of both architecture and photography. So I do have a lot of my clients have become good friends over the years. I think more than anything, you end up being commissioned by people that like to be around you, and I'm sure John probably said something the same. At the end of the day, people who are of an equal talent, they'll choose you because there's an attribute of yours that they need, whether it's your speed, whether it's your vision, whether it's your style, whether it's your company. I think at the end of the day, that's what it ultimately comes down to.
People buy from people.
Yep.
What's your best piece of business advice? And architects usually aren't very good at that.
I'm good at business. That's one thing you can I'm definitely good at business. What's my good business advice? I think the advice I give to young people who want to enter into photography, it's probably more accessible now more than ever. You can get started with a very little investment, but a while ago you couldn't. I always say that trust your story, because my story isn't your story. It's always motivating to hear how people, and that's what I loved about Carl's interview with you. I loved hearing Carl's story because I didn't know a lot of those things about Carl, and it just felt like I got to know him a bit better, which is the beauty of your podcast. But I think trust your own story. So if you're entering the industry and you're married with 3 kids and you've got a mortgage, then you've got to work to that story. It doesn't make it any less. Just sometimes
don't pretend to be someone you're not.
Yeah, and even when I started, if you asked me the truth about what I would have loved to have been a photo documentary photographer, but I was 30 and I had no other funding than what I provided for myself, and I had to get a job that made money. So, I had to make a decision about how I was going to achieve that, and obviously commercial photography was, I did weddings for 5 years when I first started out because there was no real prolific use of the internet. You had to knock on people's doors and asked to show your folio. I felt like a Turkish rug salesman in the early days, but you had to build it gradually, and so I did whatever it took, So John had a lot of people who were getting, he had this access to all these people who wanted a wedding photographer. He didn't want to do it, so he gave me the work, and it was good work because you got paid up front, and, you had a cash flow. So when the business advice about tell your story, work your own story out, whether it's your partner's going to support you, whether you're going to, and, I say to people, don't be embarrassed about taking a second job to start, because I don't know anyone who hasn't been gifted money from either a parent or a partner who doesn't have to do something else before they get their legs. And whether it's photography assisting or it doesn't matter. If you love it and you want to do it, you'll have to do something else in the beginning. Lucky if you don't. I mean, it's a different world now because everyone's can start a business overnight and call themselves anything they want. It is different. But, yeah, I don't know. Believe in yourself and let your story be your story. That's my best business advice. And have cash flow. Get a good cash flow.
Lifeblood of the business.
It is.
Very, very good business advice. I want to ask, what do you as photographers and as image makers want your creative collaborators, be that architects or anyone else you work with, to know? What do you feel we don't understand, we get wrong, or it's just that kind of one point, if there's one thing you'd want us to know?
I think more and more as the industry's evolved would be trust. Like I feel like, I'm going through a generational shift right now where obviously most people are younger than me who are commissioning or working together. And as a photographer, you get 8 hours to digest probably 5 years worth of work. I don't know that anyone gets it wrong. I guess it's just that I think one of the strengths is knowing how to get the information you need quickly as possible to be able to respond. I guess my thing would be you're not going to get the most out of a photographer by drawing pictures and showing them exactly where you want the photos taken. Give them some opportunity to show you where the pictures are, because I know that you need a narrative, but more and more that's the kind of brief I get.
Wow. Perhaps it's people coming from a different experience and they...
I just think everyone's a director now.
A control freak.
Everyone's Scorsese.
everyone's a creative director. Everyone's a celebrity.
And that's great as well, by the way, because I'll say this, it's a team effort. The photographer's not, and so it's great having a team. It's great having inputs. I guess it's just making sure all of that is managed. And I do a lot of pre-production in trying to get all that information before the shoot. And, now that we have, before you shoot a building now, you can be guaranteed there's already quite a large amount of content out there. So I do a lot of research around what's already there, and from that and the brief, I try and work out what's my point of difference going to be, or how am I going to not fail them, as in, you don't want to do worse than what's already out there. And when you're under pressure and you've just got this one window, you've got to make it happen.
And how's your image going to shine?
Yeah, how are you going to be as good or better than what's already there?
No doubt you have many amazing shoot day stories. Do you have one that still sticks with you, and you perhaps was a project that you walked in, it was genuine awe?
I've had a lot of those. I think, we have an amazing pool of talent in this country, and I have to say it's a privilege. All the firms I've worked with, I am in awe of, to be honest with you. Even the jobs that aren't as glamorous, I still there's something I respect about every I go into every project wanting it with as much value, whether it's a daggy little project or a major stadium. I try and give equal weight to what I'm trying to do for my client in every project, and I think that holds you in good stead. Especially, in the amount of time I've been in business, I've survived analog to digital, 2 GFCs, a pandemic, having a baby. So, there must be something that you offer or bring to the table to be able to keep in a creative game. It's not easy, and it's a bit of a marathon, I think, and it isn't for everyone, and it doesn't even matter. I just say to people, let it be your journey, whatever it is. It is exciting and wonderful to work in a space that you love and to go out every day and see different things and meet different people, and I always just try and respect the work for whatever it offers. And I think that's a good bit of advice I'd give people is, be respectful of your clients and what they've, I respect architects. They put so much in to everything they do. And, on the shoot, I just want to make sure they get something that they feel even better about their building at the end of it. And that's the reward for me. If they love their work more after the photo shoot, then I feel like my job's done.
Especially, I know, being on the client side, you can get so nervous at that photo shoot that you're really relying on that image as the memory forever, right? Because you hand over that building, you're not using it, you're not living in it.
And the obstacles, that's one thing we don't talk about enough, and you don't see it in the pictures. You see all this beautiful music and lovely photos, but there's a lot of obstacles in what we do. And, delivery vans, the cladding's been taken off the building, there's fluoro, the people are stressed out, they want you out of there, no one, there's so
many... You might not
be
finished, you're photographing it.
I know, and you feel, the architects do as much as they can to make everything perfect on the day, but you're dealing with real environments mostly. And, I do a lot of big work, hospitals, stadium, places where you can't control.
Live sites as well.
That's right. And it's often unfinished sites, and we're trying to make them look finished. And you're working around a crew that's still tiling. That kind of stuff happens all the time. And, I do feel for architects on those shoots because it's highly stressful because they're investing a lot in that day. So, our job is to also try and just understand and respect that pressure as well, and try and hopefully alleviate some of it.
Do you have a project that you think will stay with you forever in photographing it? Be it a building or even an overseas shoot?
Oh, look, so many. I think the one that probably my very first real great architectural shoot was, this is a funny story, I'll share it. So John was shooting for Cox Architects at the time, and he was supposed to shoot this building, but he'd been double booked, and he said, well, you go in and you'll just take the brief and you'll shoot it. And I said, but John, have you told them I'm coming? He said, just tell them you're Joan Gollings. And I said, oh my God, John. And just because of the type of person I am, and I'm so, we have to do the right thing.
Straight and narrow.
He's, just go, just go. And so I remember turning up, and it was back in the days where the directors briefed you. So Patrick Ness was there and Phil Rowe was there. And I remember walking and I had this daggy Austral lamb. I'd been shooting Austral lamb for John. I had, some Austral land shots, some shots I'd taken of some historic buildings, this little portfolio of stuff. And I could see the look on their faces when I walked in, and, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, John can't be here. And the shoot was the next day, and it was a really important building. Well, it was a beautiful, it was Kangan Batman TAFE, I think, was it, out in Broadmeadows, and it was a Polymar building for Polymar Engineering. It was just this long tube. And I remember saying to Phil, well, you don't have to use me. And he looked at me and he goes, well, I don't think we have a choice. And I remember them putting the plans out, and I was so nervous. And so I think I turned up to the dust shoot about 3 hours before dusk. Anyway, it was all on 4.5 cameras and film. And anyway, ended up being published in Wallpaper. It ended up, they were really happy. I ended up shooting for them for 15 years. And it was a great story, but again, it's another story of courage. I don't know that I could have, if John didn't push me and make it seem so frivolous, I don't know that I would have ended up in that situation. So it's also not just what we bring forward for ourselves, but it's the uncomfortable. At some point in a creative life, you have to push into discomfort, as do children as they're raised. And I guess I say this to even my son, I always try and say that the most growth and the best things happen in the most uncomfortable parts of your life.
So true.
Yeah, so that was, and that building was, and I was really new to the game back then, and I learnt a lot from people like Patrick and Phil, and I was lucky to have great architects brief and inform me. And then I also, because I was a photographer as opposed to an architect, my interests lie everywhere, not just in architecture. So I had all this other stuff that I was dabbling in as well. So there's this breadth of visual language outside of just architecture.
And it makes your practice so much more rounded, so much more robust.
I think so. But I'm not saying that people who come from architecture don't explore other things either. They do. But even architects go to other places to inform their design.
Completely.
And I think you want the same from photographers.
Completely. Have you had a chance to pay it forward? Who have you given a good shove into their professional success?
I've been really lucky. I've had amazing assistants, and over the years, so Jack Lovell was an assistant of mine, and Jack worked with me all through my pregnancy, and I wouldn't have survived work without him. And I'm really proud of him. He's doing great things in his career, and he's worked really, really hard for it. And so Marcus Webber was another assistant of mine. I mean, he's gone on to do other things, but he was with me for 5 years. And, you always want to help people that have, helped you. My last assistant, after COVID, I haven't gone back. I used to have assistants for around 2 to 3 years. And then after COVID, and having to move studios and having a child, I haven't really returned to that structure because initially the landscape didn't afford me that opportunity and, just rebuilding a business and so forth. So I now just use a lot of freelance assistants, but Gemma Wooters, and I use a number of other people, but you kind of have one main person that you work with, and they're all wonderful, and you want to help them. I try and help everyone wherever I can.
Yeah, it's no man is an island.
No one is.
As the saying goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all. So I guess, I formed with a group of other photographers, Image Makers Association, and that was also part of bringing a community to, we were having copyright issues, business was getting harder for people, and people didn't have the same opportunities like I had with John. So, Image Makers Association is now 4 years old. I think there's almost 200 members now. We run a mentorship program with Nikon. We have built a suite of business tools for people starting out. There's a WhatsApp group that's really thriving where people throw their problems in and everyone jumps in and helps each other. And that's something I'm really proud of as a legacy. That's something that we didn't have that I think is really helpful. It's also trying to pass some generational knowledge on to younger people about how to survive in a creative business over your lifetime. Like, it can't just be a young person's game. You want to create a long-term sustainable business and what that looks like. And I'm just proud of the community that's supported that. And that's something that's great for young people who want to get into photography and learn about the business of it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What continues to surprise you about photography?
Everything. It's, my assistant and I were driving out, and it was dawn or something, or some early morning we're driving out, and I said, isn't this great? Every day we get to get up, go somewhere different, and we don't even know what awaits us. And it is true. That's the magic of it. That's the part that I think when it ends, that's what I'll miss the most, is every day's a new day, a new person, a new, building, new different weather conditions. So, yeah, I love that. And it's also what's hard at times. Like, when I had my child, that was a hard thing it took me a while, and I think every female photographer who's continued to practice. I remember before the drones became a big thing, I used to do heaps of helicopter work, and I remember one morning, my son never slept for the first 2 years of his life, so I'd be up 5 times a night, and I had a dawn chopper shoot at Essendon Airport. And I remember being so tired driving out there thinking, I don't think I can do this. And it was a house. Like, spotting a house from the air is very hard. You kind of find it and then you circle and you lose it again. And I thought, and I was just calculating in my head on the way to Essendon Airport, what if I can't do this, what do I have to pay back? Like, if I stuff it up, how much is this going to cost me? And I didn't, but I think that was one of my, I think those
the doubt creeps in.
Oh, those 2 years of no sleep and trying to be an architectural photographer and a mother and, juggle nannies and assistants and, work, and everything always shifts around. So when it shifts around, you've got this entire crew of things shifting with you. So I'm glad those days are over and my son's a bit older and things are more manageable now.
They say it's not that people have it all, it's just they have all in different seasons.
That's right. That's a very good saying.
One thing works, then the other works. Another kind of thing that is described as being difficult and almost like having a baby is writing a book. And you ended up writing one during a pandemic too.
I didn't write the book. Jan Henderson wrote the book. I did the photography. So we decided to do this book together, and it was exciting and we were both looking forward to it, and then the pandemic hit. So it became much more challenging because we had to, in between every lockdown, try and get these houses and keep the architects on board And our publisher was, are you shooting? Have you got the houses? We're like, Melbourne's still locked down, because Sydney opened up and everywhere else opened
We're
up.
still stuck.
We're still at home. We're still at home. So I think Jan and I deserve some kind of government award for just finishing that book in a pandemic. But no, it was professionally a really, because I was mainly shooting, not that I don't shoot houses, but I did a lot of big projects. It was really nice to do residential work, and I was really lucky to have the calibre of architects work with us, and that's really a credit to Jan and her, her reputation and help in, garnering the people together who, had faith in us to produce the work. So, yeah, it was I think everyone wants to do a book that's theirs.
Does it feel like a different beast when you're preparing it for that print for?
Yeah, you become more neurotic. Like everything becomes just amplified because, it's on that printed page and it's there forever. It always is there forever, but I don't know, when it's under your umbrella and no. And you worry more. I think it's always other photographers that rip stuff apart more than architects. Like you always worry more about the other photographers and their...
Architects might never notice, but you're...
Well, I think there's a lot that... It's interesting in that photographers that come to photography from architecture versus photographers that come from, an interest in photography, they focus on different things. And obviously narrative is critical to being an architectural photographer because it's fundamental to what you're required to do. But it's interesting how each of them segue the visual, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like what they decide to buy into visually.
Do you still struggle with perfectionism?
Oh, yes, God, I think you couldn't be in this game if you weren't a perfectionist. It's a terrible attribute. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's great but it's debilitating at times. And, you kind of have these conversations in your head every time you retouch about, that's enough. No, I've got to do this. No, it's never enough. And especially now with AI and, the emphasis on retouching now. It's like everyone expects an art piece out of every image because they think it's available to them. And it is, but it's just like quadruple the amount of time that you put into each file. Because
so it's not saving you time. It's not making your work more efficient.
It's definitely made retouching more efficient, but where before it was very clearly understood that retouching was a separate thing, it's now there's a blurred line between...
So you're having scope creep.
You do have scope creep because, you try and handle it reasonably, and I don't, my clients understand that there's a cost associated with it, but I think creatives will always put more in than they get paid for. I think otherwise, I don't know if you can stay in the game. It's just part of the...
Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
But surely your business experience side says, no, that's not good.
Yeah, but you can't not do that, I don't think.
No.
Otherwise you're not. I always think that thing that people say, if you're not hungry and you're not, not nervous, but if you stop caring, if you become complacent, I think it shows in your work.
Yes.
So, and I think the exciting thing for us as, more mature businesses is... I think all the shifts are exciting. I've enjoyed every shift that we've had, probably not social media so much. That was the one I rejected for a long time, but then begrudgingly went, okay, well, this is part of what you need to do to compete.
You've got to post,
You've got to remain visible, I guess. That's how I see social media is if you're not remaining visible, then you're not in people's minds, whereas your visibility becomes, we might think of that person, whereas if you're not there, they're not thinking of you. And it's so, as we talked a little bit about before, Melbourne, I reckon, must have the highest density of architectural photographers in the world, like more so than Sydney, more so. There's so many now. And, the landscape's shifting in how architecture is being interpreted. It's not the traditional way. There's a lot more fluidity and editorial work. There's so many different ways of seeing it now. Architects don't have control anymore over their work like they used to.
Yes.
They would commission a photographer and that would be the only representation of the building. So they did, in some ways, control how... Yeah, that's gone. Yeah. And it's exciting, it's a double-edged sword, but it also produces so many new exciting ways of seeing something and opportunities that one person doesn't get in one day of professional shooting. So I think it's a great time. And, even offices, a lot of people have people in their office that take a lot of photos that they use, I don't think we can – I don't poo-poo accessibility of photography. I actually love what it brought to my life, and I think it's great that it's available to everyone. And I just encourage people to kind of try and practice it to the highest level.
I think it just pushes or really reveals who the real professionals and the artists in the photography space are.
Yes.
And it's amazing that everyone else can still capture those everyday moments.
Yes.
And can still, have some sort of creative outlet even at an amateur level. But I'm wondering, how do you feel about AI, even though it's adding time to editing? But
look, I worry a little bit. We at Image Makers did all the government advocacy with the AI and the Copyright Enforcement Review, which we successfully lobbied to not have free trawling of, images and data for AI training.
Thank you and congratulations.
Yeah, well, I believe in that.
It's huge.
It is huge, and we are affiliated with the UK body and Canadian body, and we've had the most success in Australia, which I'm grateful to our government for listening, because it is big guy little guy conversations.
Yes.
And the big guys say the same thing: Australia get left behind. And I just say this country's built off small business, and we have so much flavour and just incredible creativity that come from small businesses, and I just don't think we want to kill them off. It's the spirit of the community, and I'm glad for where we stand. What it means, who knows? Some people say it's a waste of time, it's going to happen anyway, but I feel that's probably true. Like, we're not going to stop this, but I just feel like we've got to, like every bit of technology that's ever happened in the history of the world, we've got to band together to use it for good in the best way we can, and we do have to hold tech giants accountable for what they're doing to the world. There has to be accountability, and I just think people just have to keep speaking about it, and eventually, you can't just roll over and die and just let everything...
You can't just accept it, yes.
No, so I'm proud of the fight. I'm proud of what we've achieved so far, and, I'll always advocate for small creators, absolutely.
It's interesting. You mentioned also holding these tech giants accountable. It's all come out now that their own kids don't have the iPads. Their kids don't have iPhones. They're not using their own product that they're putting out onto the market.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing in that same countercultural position of rejecting technology, I'm seeing also this amazing return of parents choosing to pick up a digital camera, even if it's point and shoot, instead of using their phone. So they're not holding up a phone in front of their kid's face. So they're holding a little digital camera, at least that old point and shoot that was dying since their Kentucky tour.
I know, and this is a dilemma I face with my son, because obviously being a photographer and a mother, I probably have only taken maybe one family portrait, and I just recently shot his basketball in Adelaide. But other than that, everything's on the iPhone. And I've actively chosen that because I want to be a mother rather than a photographer when I'm with him. So, but he's just like, now, I don't want the photos, And I'm like, yes, you do, because ultimately they're always a nice memory. But I'm torn between now I have to start giving agency to his decisions, And it is true what you say, like, I don't know what it felt like because I didn't grow up. Well, I mean, my dad took photos, but not like...
They were filmed.
But there was not like it is now. Like, everyone's got a camera for everything. So I guess there is something to be said for those kids that have grown up with that. And they'll probably have something to say about it. There'll probably some post-traumatic experience
post-technology
they can
stress.
Unpack in 10 years' time.
Of how will we respond to coping with ubiquitous technology, but maybe it'll come full circle, and we're already seeing this being marketed to us on social media: return to the homestead, return to the farm, the veggie patch, the more collective living.
Yep.
Where the image in my mind straight away went back to your family property and in the rural New South Wales, if that's where we're headed.
Yeah, well, for me it was, when we went, my partner's Tanzanian, so we spend a lot of time in Tanzania, and that is my grounding of what matters. And you know, that's still got huge community that exists. I mean, religion's still quite, you know, active in village spaces, but, you know, you see there the true essence of community in terms of, you know, if somebody dies, the village comes together and pays for the funeral. I mean, it's, you know, somebody's got water, people take the water, you know. We're very closed off in our neighbourhoods now, you know. It feels like that. I live in a city, but it feels like everyone's got their patch. So it's nice whenever I see things like your radio station or thing, you know, even the sporting happening outside, it's great to be part of those communities because they are still communities and they're coming together of people with a common, you know, purpose or interest.
Still that collective beating heart that brings people together. If there's one place you dream of photographing that you've not been to yet and you've been to... Have you hit a half century in terms of countries you've visited so far?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that because I've visited so many amazing places. I think I do love landscape and culture, and I do.
Have you been to Antarctica?
I haven't been to Antarctica.
I'd love to see you photograph either the scientists or the research bases on Antarctica.
Yeah. It's cold. Yes, I don't know. I just keep exploring. I mean, I like also the unknown about photography sometimes, like the things that just, if you've got stuff with you and then something. I think the older I get, the more relaxed I get with how I want to receive environments. And I think I'm excited about how with that, I don't know, you just kind of relax a bit more about that stuff. You're not in search of it as much because you've found a lot. So, yeah, I don't know. I love India. I'd love to take my son to India. I'd love to do more of India. I drove a tuk-tuk across India for a charity thing where we drove 2,500 miles in a tuk-tuk and raised money for clean water, and that was a wonderful experience. But I'd like to go back because I don't feel like I saw, when I say the real India, I mean, you know, we were on the real outskirts of everything and it was wonderful because of that, but I never saw any of the major, you know, the major cities or, yeah.
Do you feel that now with such a successful career and with so much under your belt that you've arrived at the same kind of looseness and freedom that you were photographing that timber plank at the race at the race ground?
You know, it's funny you say that. That's exactly what it is. And I remember when I met John, and I think he was about 55 when I met him, and I just remember how I thought, oh, will I ever feel that confident? Or, you know, I remember observing him, and I was lucky enough to go to Hampi in India with him at the end of that tuk-tuk ride. We just by chance ended up in India in the same week, which was bizarre. And then went to Cambodia, I think it was last year or the year before, and went around with him doing some more of Angkor Wat. And I think I can see a bit of that in myself, just more of that chill, whereas I think it takes a long time when you're learning to learn, you know, you're so focused on technique and managing all these things, and then you reach a point where they're all intuitive, and it is peaceful to be there.
It's true what they say, I guess, a lifetime of unlearning.
Yeah.
I'm mindful of the time, so I will ask my last question.
Yeah.
And that is, what gives you hope?
People. Good people. Good people give me hope.
Yeah. Here. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Dianna Snape.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of radio architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
We're Riviera, and you're listening to Radio Karim.